Misunderstanding the technologies, misunderstanding the requirements, misunderstanding each other. Comes from a number of different areas. And so let's talk about the technical stuff for a moment. How can we reduce misunderstanding with the code that we're using, the technologies that we're using?
Lots of feedback.
Sorry?
Lots of feedback.
Lots of feedback, like what? What kind of? How?
Feedback between what the code does, what the users want.
Okay, so showing it to the users, getting some feedback. Yeah. That's a little bit more about misunderstanding about the requirements, getting clarification on the requirements. What else? What causes problems in the technologies? In the code?
Lack of collaboration.
Lack of collaboration between whom?
Anybody on the Agile team, really. Somebody who doesn't understand things the way someone else does.
So you may understand a piece of the code better than someone else, and if y'all aren't talking about it or don't have a way to communicate about it, that could cause trouble. So how can we prevent technical kinds of miscommunication and misunderstanding?
Other than automated tests?
Oh, other than automated tests, thank you. Yeah, great. Okay, so tell me more about that. How can automated tests help?
Automated tests put your assumptions into hard code, essentially. Right? You've laid out, this is what I expect to happen. And
right.
you run the test, either it does or it doesn't.
So you set the expectations in the automated test, in the unit test, and it helps communicate the intent of the code. It helps ensure that you haven't broken something. And so, what else can we do?
More complete specifications.
I'm sorry?
More complete specifications.
More complete specifications. That can help on the requirement side. Are there any XP fans in here? Extreme programming? Okay, so when you say XP, what immediately comes to mind? Pair programming, yeah. So if I pair program and I'm doing test-driven development, which you should all be doing, then I'm going to have a better understanding of the code. The code's going to be better. What you know, I learned from pairing. So over the last dozen or more years, we should have, or we've learned or should have learned, test-driven development and how to reduce the number of technology-related problems we have. Misunderstandings about the code, bad code and the software craftsmanship movement is picking up steam. So those things are helping us with the misunderstandings about the code and the technology. So coming back now to the requirements, we certainly have misunderstandings about the requirements as well. Do misunderstandings about the requirements cause other problems in your team? I see a couple of heads like what? Heads nodding.
Missing timelines.
Missing timelines. Misunderstandings cause you to miss deadlines. What else?
Priorities.
Misunderstandings creates conflicts of priorities.
Like what qualities are important. So some people might think complete feature coverage is more important than one feature working fine.
There's lots. When you get a requirement like a user story like this, there's many ways you could implement it, and there could be misunderstandings about what quality means. How important is quality on this? How important is usability in this aspect of the application versus another aspect? What other kinds of problems do we get when we have misunderstandings? Churn and lost velocity. What else?
Multiple versions of the same requirements.
Tell me more, Al.
Like that might be in a Word document, it might be in a unit test document.
So
it might be in the code, it might be in an Excel.
Criteria. As we pass the requirements around, right, as we pass the requirements around, it may get morphed a little bit or misunderstood a little bit or maybe written a little bit differently. And that can cause confusion if we look at the old stuff. So what I was getting at is a lot of these misunderstandings causes tension. It causes a lack of trust. That particular programmer is he never listens to what I tell him the requirement needs to be. And he just always does what he wants to do. And really there's maybe was a legitimate misunderstanding. He's not going off being subversive. Maybe he is, but that's a problem. But yeah, we think, that, or maybe all those lazy programmers or this or that. But we have a tendency as humans to assume the worst in other people. So when there's some kind of misunderstanding, when something doesn't go quite right, we assume that somebody was either did it their own way because they wanted to, or they don't like me, or whatever. And so these misunderstandings can be a real problem and cause a lot of tension and issues within the team. So we want to remove those kinds of things, as if I needed to tell you that. And so what we're going to talk about tonight are these things: acceptance test-driven development, behavior-driven development, specification by example. They're all about the same thing with some different nuances. But the folks with the example-driven development, specification by example communities would say that using examples is an easy way to get rid of a lot of this misunderstanding and avoid all the problems we have with misunderstanding. And I think there's a whole lot of truth to that, enough for me to dig into it and want to share these concepts with you. So by examples, really, we're already using examples. Think about it this way. Customer comes up to the business analyst or the product owner and says, I have this thing in Excel. I'd like it integrated into the rest of the system. So here's this report, and I want you to automate it. Or here's this calculation I do by hand. Here's how I do it. Can you enter that into the system? Or here's some other thing, some other report, or some other thing I want to happen. There's almost always an example that the customer, somebody's using in real life, and they can demonstrate it with an example. And they give it to the product owner or the business analyst, and what do? They turn it into an abstract requirement, throw the example away. Okay, so now here's your nice user story. Here's your nice abstract example-less user story or requirement. And so QA kind of does the same thing in a different kind of way. They use examples. QA has lots of examples in their test cases, right? But some quality assurance folks, they're not going to show them to anybody else. And if they did try to show them to a programmer, their eyes are going to glaze over. That's testing. I don't want anything to do with that. Don't show me your test cases, please.
Test cases?
I don't want to see them. What? Say that again?
People still write test cases?
I don't know. Yes, actually,
Yes, they do.
people do still write. Anybody still deal with test cases? Okay. Who does not want to admit it, but they do? Okay, so. And the product owners and the business analysts, they don't want to see the test cases in most situations or circumstances. And dev. So they will come up with some perverse edge case. They'll code it up, and they won't share the examples with anybody. They'll throw the example away once they get it into code. So we all use examples. The problem is we're not using the same examples. And we're not sharing these examples, and we're not on the same page. Hence a lot of the misunderstanding that we have. So I'm going to get a marker here. I'm going to draw a process. So I have some user story, and this process that I'm going to draw is related mainly to specification by example, I guess, or maybe acceptance test-driven development. In fact, there's a great blog called Test Obsessed by Elizabeth Hendrickson, and this is one of her documents, and it talks about acceptance test-driven development a lot, and it's a great article. I'll put links on the meetup group after this is over. So I'm going to give you the process that we talk about when we're doing specification by example, or ATDD. And I'm going to draw it a piece at a time. So to start off with, when the first step, when we have a user story and we want to do ATDD, is to discuss the story. Well, we all already do that. We do that in iteration planning. We do that before we estimate it. We do that when we're backlog grooming, right? So y'all are very much accustomed to discussing a story And of course, it's best to get everybody in the room when you do that. Your product owner, your testers, your developers, anybody who's involved in the project. Get everybody in the room and talk about the story, what it is that needs to be built. So let's suppose I have this story. Users are required to use secure passwords. And suppose we're in iteration planning, and I'm the product owner, and I said, okay, here's your story. You might want to know a little bit more. What might you want to know?
How do you define a user?
How do you, which users? Yeah.
Everybody? Admins?
Okay. What else might you want to know?
What is secure?
Yeah. What does secure mean? What else?
When are they required?
I'm sorry?
In what ways are they required to use them? Is it at certain points?
Yeah,
All
like
the time?
when? Like when are we talking about? When does this user story take effect? When I'm logging in, when I'm creating a password, when I'm changing a password? Lots of good questions, right? So, of course, this story is not in the proper story format. It doesn't have acceptance tests. It's got a lot of problems with it. We're not going to fix all of those, but we're going to get to examples pretty soon. So, what else might you want to know? What happens when you forget the password? Yep. And should that be part of this story?
Well, okay, so for this story, what happens if I forgot my password?
What happens if you've forgotten your password? And so I'm going to say that that's probably a separate story. Because this one's kind of small, and if I add that to it, I think it'd be larger. So yeah, I would write down, if I hadn't thought of that, oh yeah, I would write down another user story. So what else might you want to know?
What systems?
I'm sorry?
What system? Or
Yeah,
systems are
okay, right. So, of course, there is some context for this story. And in this particular case, I'm going to say it's for something, it's not, we don't hold credit cards, it's not an e-commerce site, it's maybe like D-Zone, Developer Zone. Have anybody heard of D-Zone? They've got these nice ref cards, and you have to log in just to see some of their content, I guess, is so that you can put a comment or feedback on a ref card. So nothing really important. It doesn't have to be terribly secure, but that's the system I have in mind. What else might you want to know?
Min and max links.
Okay, the length. What else?
Character.
What do you mean?
What characters are allowed?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, back to what does secure mean? Okay, so let's say that I want the length to be at least 4 lengths and long, and I want it to have at least 1 letter, and I want it to have at least 1 number. Again, I'm not storing credit cards or anything like that. It doesn't have to be terribly secure. I just want it to be, just a little bit more secure. What else might you want to know? I'm sorry?
Do you support internationalization?
Internationalization in here? Yeah, I'm going to say the plain old ASCII code set.
Upper and lower.
No special characters.
Upper and lower
Small set here.
Letters, I don't care which.
Max length, case or sensitive?
Max length. What do you think? How about to 20?
Relation to other information like your username or your person name.
Yeah, it kind of talks about which users. Yep, I understand.
No, like can your
Like, can my password be my username?
Oh, can my password also be my? Oh, I did not see. Now I see. Thank you, Alex.
we do this all the time.
Appreciate you helping me with this understanding there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get into that now. For the purpose, that's great, but for the purposes of today, I want to keep it simple.
Can I see the password in plain text when I put it in?
That's interesting. I'm going to say that that's a whole nother story related to creating passwords and changing passwords and entering passwords and logging into the site. I've already I have a login and a changed password and stuff. All I want to do is beef up the security for this story.
You said upper and lower case.